The first time he saw the creature, he thought his mind had finally snapped. Dr. Elias Warren had spent 12 days alone in the northern range, deep enough into the wilderness that even the birds seemed to look at him with suspicion. Snowmelt soaked the ground, fog clung to the trees like something alive, and silence pressed on his ears until he could hear his own heartbeat. He had come looking for ecological anomalies, strange tracks reported by hikers, unusual vocalizations caught on distant audio recorders. Nothing unusual for a field biologist. Nothing he hadn't debunked 100 times. But then he found the first print. It was at the river bend, half filled with icy water but unmistakable, 5 broad toes, a heel sunk so deep it suggested a weight far exceeding that of any bear. He knelt over it for nearly 30 minutes, running his fingers along its edges, measuring its span, checking the soil displacement. Every rational explanation he clung to dissolved one by one. The print was real, the size was impossible, and the placement, centered, balanced, purposeful, hinted at a creature that walked like a man, not like a beast. He might have left it at that, one anomaly in a career of anomalies. But 20 paces downstream, he found another. Then another. A trail, subtle but distinct, moving into the forest where the trees grew close and the world turned dim. Elias had no intention of following it. Not at first. His breath was already trembling, and a quiet voice in the back of his mind insisted that whatever made those prints might still be close. Still watching. But curiosity was the predator that had hunted him all his life. Before he realized what he was doing, he was stepping carefully along the trackway, pushing through the brambles, listening for anything that might hint at the creature ahead. For hours, he found nothing. Not even disturbed brush. The trail gradually became harder to follow as the forest thickened. Then he reached a clearing he didn't recognize, an oval patch of earth where the snow had melted almost entirely, leaving damp soil and a scattering of broken branches. At first, it looked like windfall debris. Then the light shifted, and he saw the pattern. A nest. A massive one, woven from branches thicker than his arms. It had been abandoned recently. The ground still held warmth where something large had slept. His breath caught. Every hair on his arms rose. He should have left then, should have documented it, photographed it, and hiked out to analyze the data with a clear head. He even reached for his camera. Then a low sound echoed behind him. Not the growl of a bear. Not the call of any animal he knew. A voice. Gravelly, deep, almost human, yet not human at all. He turned slowly. It stood half-shrouded between 2 cedar trunks, a towering silhouette that belonged to neither myth nor reality. 7 feet tall at least. Broad shoulders draped in dark, coarse hair that blended with the forest shadows. Eyes like burnished amber, intelligent and wary, fixed on him with a depth that made his chest constrict. Elias couldn't move. The creature didn't move either. They watched each other for a long, suspended moment. When it stepped forward, he expected violence. But its movement was calm, deliberate, almost curious. One massive hand pushed aside the cedar branch, revealing more of its face, a face that was not monstrous but strangely expressive. Lines of age carved along the brow. A scar across the cheek. Muscles that tightened as if prepared to flee rather than attack. Elias felt an overwhelming, irrational certainty slam into him. This creature feared him. His throat tightened. I won't hurt you. The creature flinched at the sound, then studied him again. Slowly, it lifted one hand, palm open. Fingers slightly curled, showing they were empty. A gesture of peace. Something inside Elias shifted. An ancient instinct he never knew he carried stirred awake. Recognition, connection, a sense that he was standing before a remnant of something the world had forgotten. A twig snapped somewhere in the forest. The creature's eyes flicked toward the sound. It inhaled sharply through its nose, once, twice, then turned back to him with sudden urgency. Go, its posture seemed to say. Before he could react, the creature vanished into the trees, moving with terrifying grace for something so large. Elias stood alone again in the clearing, but the air still vibrated with the presence of what he'd seen. He knew then that everything had changed. That night in his tent, he lay awake long after the fire died, heart pounding with memories he wasn't ready to name. His hands still trembled as he scribbled notes by lantern light, anatomical observations, behavioral cues, a rough sketch of the creature's face. Every instinct as a scientist screamed at him to document everything. Publish, prove, reveal. But the image of its frightened eyes kept returning to him. That was not a creature prepared to face the world of humans. That was something ancient and vulnerable, something that survived only because it remained hidden. And he, by finding it, had become a threat. He barely slept. When dawn finally burned through the fog, he packed his equipment and went back to the clearing. The nest remained. The prints still circled the edge of the clearing, fresh. He knelt and touched one, feeling the faint warmth left behind. He whispered, "I'm sorry." Then he took out his camera. He hesitated, and he smashed it against a rock. Shards scattered through the damp soil. The lens cracked. The memory card bent. He destroyed his data log next, a digital notepad containing sketch after sketch, measurement after measurement. His hands shook violently as he pried out the battery, snapped it, dismantled the device until it was nothing but fragments in the moss. The scientist in him screamed at the loss. But another part of him, the part that had looked into amber eyes and seen fear, knew there was no other choice. Evidence would bring research teams. Research teams would bring government agencies. And government agencies would bring extinction. He could not let that happen. He wandered deeper into the forest, as though returning to the place where he first saw it would somehow justify the destruction he'd committed. He didn't expect to see the creature again. It had been a miracle once. Miracles do not repeat themselves. But as he approached the river bend, he sensed the presence before he saw it. A shadow shifted behind a fallen log. A soft exhale. Then the creature stepped out, not confrontational this time, but curious. Observant. Elias lifted his empty hands, fingers spread. "I destroyed the evidence," he murmured. "No one will know." The creature tilted its head, nostrils flaring, as if assessing truth not in words but in scent. After a long moment, it stepped closer, close enough that Elias could see the fine details of its fur, the subtle scars, the intelligence burning in its gaze. It lifted one hand and touched Elias's chest, gently, like a friend. Emotion surged through him so quickly he nearly gasped. Gratitude, trust, recognition of a bond neither fully understood. Then the creature turned and pointed deeper into the woods. A warning. Men were coming. Elias didn't hear them yet, but he trusted the creature's senses. He backed away slowly, heart racing. When he reached the tree line, he looked back one last time. The creature was gone, swallowed by the forest as if it had never existed. Within an hour, he heard distant voices, two hikers, joking loudly, unaware of how close they were to something that should never be found. Elias guided them away with a fabricated story about unstable terrain and a recent landslide. They shrugged and followed his direction without question. When they were gone, Elias realized the truth. He was now the creature's protector, the fragile barrier between it and a world that would fear it, hunt it, exploit it. And if he failed, humanity would destroy one of the last mysteries left on Earth. That night, the sky cracked open with cold stars. Elias sat beside the river, the fragments of his destroyed equipment buried beneath a cairn of stones. He had walked away from everything, data, evidence, the chance to become the scientist who proved a legend. But he felt no regret. Because he had seen the truth. A truth meant only for those willing to carry its weight without claiming it. The world wanted monsters to fear or discoveries to exploit. It had no room left for miracles. He whispered into the darkness, unsure if the creature still listened, "I'll keep your secret. As long as I have breath." The forest responded with a rustle of leaves, faint but unmistakable. A promise acknowledged. Elias closed his eyes and let the wilderness surround him, knowing he had crossed a threshold he could never return from. He had glimpsed something extraordinary, something profoundly alive and deserving of the solitude it fought to preserve. And he understood, with a clarity that settled deep into his bones, that some truths must remain hidden, not because they are terrifying, but because they are too precious to expose to a world that has forgotten how to cherish them. He would protect the creature. Even if it meant burning his career to ashes. Even if it meant becoming a ghost himself. Because sometimes, the greatest act of science is knowing when not to reveal the answer. And sometimes, the greatest act of humanity is protecting something that can never repay you. In the end, drive. Elias Warren walked out of the wilderness without proof. But he carried a secret that would haunt him with equal parts wonder and burden, a secret that reminded him every day that the world was far larger, stranger, and more fragile than anyone dared imagine. And somewhere deep in the forest, a pair of amber eyes watched him leave, knowing that for the first time in a long, hidden history, a human had chosen to keep the truth safe.